Good evening, everyone. It is September 15th, and I'm going to give a battlefield update on what's going on in Ukraine. So in the last 2 weeks, Russia has gained about 87 square miles of ground, which is roughly 4 times the size of Manhattan Island in New York. Now, that's a very slow pace. That's actually slower than last month right now. We're looking at probably the slowest pace of the year for the Russians. But still, Russia does have advantages in manpower and artillery as of right now. Both sides are suffering high losses, with Russia suffering about 30% more casualties than Ukraine. Now let's go ahead and start up north. We have the Kursk to Sumy axis up here. And what we're seeing is Russia attempting to push new front lines where they're moving from Kursk towards Sumy along the Russian border. Now, President Zelensky says that the offensive has basically already failed, and Ukrainian forces have actually edged forward on both the flanks and, interestingly, along the front as well, and continue raiding Russian positions deep into their held territory. And in fact, some of them go into Russian territory as well. Now, this remains a secondary theater. It's more about a distraction than any kind of decisive gains for Russia. So what we expect is raids, drones, artillery fire, but not a large-scale breakthrough for the Russians, or frankly the Ukrainians. Now, moving a bit further south, we go to the Kharkiv axis right here, and really the goals for both the Russians and the Ukrainians is protecting major cities. For the Russians, it's protecting Belgorod. For the Ukrainians, it's obviously protecting Kharkiv right here. Here, Russia is trying to create a buffer zone and have been trying to create an adequate one for a little over a year at this point in order to protect Belgorod, and they do this by launching daily assaults backed by glide bombs. Ukrainian brigades rotate quite often to prevent exhaustion, and they also rely on drones and artillery to hold the lines. This front is highly attritional for what they're gaining out of it, which is essentially nothing, with Russia only gaining a few tiny hamlets here or there, and then actually losing over half of them. So it's a 2 steps forward, 1.5 steps back situation for the Russians here. So we can expect more of a grinding fight, constant drone usage, and heavy artillery duels between Ukraine and Russia. Now next we move over to Luhansk, where we have Kupiansk to Crimea. This is a front line where both sides are seeing gains and losses quite fluidly, and that's largely why we see a large amount of gray zone here. This is Russia wanting to take Kupiansk, but the terrain does not favor them whatsoever. To take Kupiansk, you actually have to cross a river and are in technically lower territory than the defending Ukrainians. This is also the location where the Baba Yaga drone units are, and they are incredibly effective at hitting Russian supply points and the equipment that is on the move. This area is also littered with mines, and these mines have existed there since the early days of the war. And so between mines and drones, there's just huge amounts of wreckage out here, and Russia is not gaining a lot. But nonetheless, they are making slight gains. The likely future here is just more of this back and forth, more of take territory, lose territory, take territory here, lose territory, maybe conduct a raid, hold it for a day or two, and then lose it. Again, that's why there's just so much gray zone on this portion of the battlefield. So we're not going to see a lot of dramatic breakthroughs in the Kupiansk region. Now, moving further south, we have the Avdiivka, Chasiv Yar, Pokrovsk axis. This is the main effort of Russia as of right now and has been for well over a year at this point. Now, just orienting you, we have Pokrovsk in here. Avdiivka actually sits in here. You can't really see it. Russia's already taken it. But then you have Chasiv Yar, which sits just west of Bakhmut right here. And all of this is a main effort focus for the Russians. They're simultaneously trying to push westward to envelop Pokrovsk and are running into a brick wall and have, for as I've said, well over a year now. So they have decided to shift northward to try to outflank Dobropilia right here to possibly take them and redirect the attention of the Ukrainians. Across this entire front line, the Russians push daily with glide bomb assaults, trying to break the Ukrainian defenses. Around Dobropilia right here, Russia has been pressing, but Ukraine conducted several successful counterattacks, and I'll zoom in for you here. And you can see that the Russians had their salient cut in half by the Ukrainians. They were almost goaded in. Massive defensive network was set up here. And this is actually cut off some Russian units, and they are currently holding here, cut off from the rest of the Russian main body. The fighting across this entire front line, running from south of Pokrovsk up to Chasiv Yar, is incredibly intense. They see 100 or more clashes every single day. But in the near term, because of the brick walls Russia is running into trying to outflank Dobropilia, and the brick wall including losing territory in and around Chasiv Yar, expect Russia to try to move more south and potentially conduct their newest flanking operations from this location here to try to cut off this highway. This highway still supports Pokrovsk, although it is incredibly dangerous. That highway still allows Pokrovsk to continue to maintain logistics and refit support of new troops. Now, just kind of a brief update of what's going on even further south when we talk about Zaporizhia. This is a largely static zone here. Russia deploys swarms of drones backed by glide bombs to punish any kind of noticeable Ukrainian movements, while Ukraine counters with artillery strikes and their own drone interdictions, but neither side has made any meaningful advances for months here, and this sector is largely in a stalemate. Now, moving more towards the Kherson region, across the river, both sides run raids using their special operations forces. Ukraine continues to focus on striking logistics on the left bank, while Russia answers with artillery and drones. The tempo here is pretty steady. It's a little bit more fighting than what we see in Zaporizhia, but it's not decisive, and it's likely going to stay that way until any resources are moved to concentrate in this region, which I just don't see happening. Now, over the entirety of the battlefield, Russia has intensified long-range strikes. Between September 4th and 10th alone, they launched more than 1,800 drones and 63 missiles. Ukraine claims to intercept about 87% of the drones, but enough still slip through to hit energy and infrastructure. Ukraine does counter with its own deep strikes. On September 14th and September 15th, drones hit various refineries as far north as St. Petersburg, which is a critical propaganda hit for Russia because St. Petersburg and Moscow are generally considered untouchable, but we are seeing Ukraine easily conduct operations into those cities. This is forcing key processing units offline and costing Russia billions of rubles. Now, in Crimea, which, yes, this is still Ukraine's territory, even though Russia took it over 10 years ago, we see Ukrainian missiles and drones continue to degrade command posts, radars, and air defenses, especially in the Black Sea, where Ukraine struck Russian Black Sea Fleet communications hubs in Sevastopol, further limiting Russia's command and control abilities. These hits on Russia's warships are a part of Ukraine's campaign to secure its shipping lanes and weaken the Russian fleet's ability to launch cruise missiles. So what are we going to see over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Well, in Donetsk, Russia will keep pushing hard around Pokrovsk, Dobropilia, hoping for incremental gains. Ukraine will counter with local counterattacks and strikes on Russian troop concentrations. Up at Kharkiv and Luhansk, expect the grinding pattern to continue, daily assaults and drone swarms with little chance of major breakthroughs. Ukraine is going to keep hitting Russian refineries and Crimean defenses. Russia will keep massing drone and missile raids, some of which may again spill into NATO airspace, and we'll have to see what the response is. That's it for now. Hopefully we can see some movement more on the political, strategic side from the United States and NATO as frustration grows with Putin, but we've kind of seen Trump move to a cop-out stance where he said that he would only move if NATO countries move, knowing full well that getting unanimity on hitting Russia hard is not going to happen, especially when you have countries like Hungary and potentially even Turkey wanting to counter that narrative.